Hello and welcome to Rethinking Document Storage. Find your files more quickly with SharePoint lists. My name is Nathan Austin. I'll be guiding you through the session today, and Stephanie Kingsley will be producing behind the scenes. To start us off, we are going to do some quick takes. What are the top issues that we're going to be touching on today, just so you kind of know some of the takeaways. SharePoint list, one of the reasons why we're doing this session today is because there's been confusion when we work with people on how SharePoint lists are applied in SharePoint. So there's two main ways in which SharePoint lists gets applied, and we're going to show you both of those today. We're going to focus primarily on the document storage side, but the other one is people also have confusion around document libraries. What are document libraries? And I didn't know that there are more than one document libraries, or why would you use more than one document library? How does that all work? So we're going to cover that today, as well as how you can think through document storage, like if we're asking in this session, rethink through your document storage, so how filters and views can save your team time. So understanding that, you can help engineer or design your file storage and some of the metadata, to foreshadow a little bit, your document storage to help save your team some time. Okay, with that said, here we go. The purpose of this session, again, we really want you to, if you're thinking about moving files off of a file server and maybe it's not all your files, but maybe it's most of your files, maybe it's certain departments in their files. If you're thinking of moving off that file server, rethink it. Could you copy and paste what you're doing today? Yes, mostly. However, there's some reasons why you'd probably not want to do it that way. Learning how Teams and SharePoint works together, how SharePoint document libraries, how metadata, all these things that we're going to talk about and cover today. We believe that there's value in thinking through it and planning ahead and maybe rethinking how you do your document storage. So that means whether you're already using Teams and SharePoint and maybe you just feel like you're kind of using it and you want to get better at it, maybe you've moved to Teams and you're using that, but you are ready to get rid of that file server in the near future and you want to plan ahead for that, this is a great session for you. Or perhaps you're trying to figure out if Teams and SharePoint might even make any sense for your organization. This will be a little bit advanced content for you. However, this will give you some visibility into some of the value that SharePoint and SharePoint lists and document storage can provide relative to using SharePoint. Then we're going to dig into, so we're going to talk about the common problems, some of which I just illustrated. Then we're going to get into the demonstration. I will show you how this all works. I've already set up several different items to kind of walk you through and help you think through. And again, we do move relatively quickly. That's why we record these, so you can always pause and go back or rewatch again. Again, forgive me in advance for having to listen to my voice twice if you end up rewatching it. But thank you for joining us today for that. And then we'll join up with some Q&A, next steps, and open at the end. So housekeeping item. The Q&A is open right now. So if you have any questions as we go through the session or even right now and you just don't want to forget them, please go ahead and post them in the Q&A. Stephanie oftentimes will be able to answer them offline, but we'll also then answer them live at the end of the session. So again, whether it's now or at any point during the session, please go ahead and enter that. And we look forward to answering those questions afterwards. Before we move into the content, I always like to say just 1 minute about Mytech. We are a business and technology consulting organization that works with small and medium businesses right now within an hour drive of our offices. So right now that's the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul and Denver, Colorado. Over the last 21 years, we've learned that we have a proven IT strategy that we know delivers consistent and reliable results for our clients. Is it the only IT strategy? No, but we know this one really works, keeps our clients secure and keeps them productive. And ultimately, it removes IT challenges so you as a business can focus on serving your customers better and being more adaptable to other business challenges that we all inevitably face. Working together, our clients achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments. If you'd like to learn more about that, go ahead and raise your hand. Let us know. We'd love to have a conversation, but I also know that's not why you're here today. So let's move on to some of the common problems that are faced with legacy file storage. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to show the 2 different types of SharePoint lists and how those apply, but for the most part, this session is going to be talking about how SharePoint lists apply to document storage. Okay, first off, one of these problems is a technical limitation that you have to be aware of, and this is a asterisk public service announcement, is that there are some technical limitations relative to moving from a traditional file server and folder structure to SharePoint and then and or OneDrive, because OneDrive and SharePoint work hand in hand. So we actually will post in the follow-up email and on this page, once we're done, a link that's a Microsoft resource, but ultimately the SharePoint, the URL, like all the characters at the top of the page on the browser, when you have, the site and you have the folder structure and subfolder structure and document name and all those kinds of things, that creates a long character string in your browser. That character string has a limit of 255 or 256, I've seen different ones, but Microsoft's page says 255 characters. So that is a technical limitation that you need to be aware of. And sometimes, if you're moving from your file server to SharePoint, is one of those problems you need to figure out. And this session will help you address that character and that technical limitation. All right, we're going to show you different ways in which you can solve that problem. All right, one of the other challenges that exists, and I'll illustrate this, is that there oftentimes are multiple attributes associated with a single file. So if one person in your organization is saving a document and there's a multiple folder structure, they might see that it could go in this folder. But another person in the organization might take that same file because maybe they're in a different department. They're like, well, no, I think it should go in this folder. But now you have two documents in different folders, or it's just that much difficult to find because someone might think it's over here versus over here. I'll illustrate that in our session today. Finding information. If there's one thing that I hear from nearly every organization with whom we work and consult in helping plan their document storage design or structure, is that unless you've been in the organization for years, and even if you've been in the organization for years, you oftentimes struggle finding information. So imagine you're new to the organization and you're trying to find information as far as what might be applicable to you in your role. How can you make it easier for your team to be able to do that? We're going to show you an example of how in the demo environment, and we'll even show you an example of how Mytech has at least move forward towards solving that problem, but I wouldn't say that we've perfected it because that's always an iterative process. Too many subfolders. That's one of the things I hear is like clicking in and out of subfolders. There's a lot of different clicks to navigate. So maybe there's some ways in which we can reduce, but not necessarily completely eliminate the need for subfolders. And of course, finding files quickly, being able to enable your team to find the files that you use more regularly versus files that aren't that applicable to them. What are some of the ways in which you can enable that? We'll talk about views and filtering and sorting. And then again, that if you're different views, as I mentioned, depending on the role and or your need. And so we'll walk through different scenarios for that as well. So these are some of the common problems that we experience or that we hear from folks as we work with them on designing their file structure. And we'll dig into all of these inside of the demonstration. But before we dig into the demonstration, I want to illustrate that the content today is typically in the steps that we walk through to help clients plan out this transition or this migration. It's not the first step. It's usually the third or fourth step in the process. And so I wanted to provide, for those of you who are maybe going through this process and thinking, we've done another session that's called Migrating Your File Server to SharePoint. And that session touches very briefly on the content of today, but it goes deeper into other aspects that are preparatory or that support going into this session. So that might be a session to review if you're trying to self-serve and go through this process yourself. And then if you're a little bit more technical, we also have Power User Group sessions, and we've done a couple sessions that will dig into this content as well. Again, this goes our Power User Group sessions go a little bit more technical. So if you're the one that, if you get technical, your eyes glaze over, I would not view those sessions. But if you're that person in the organization that is more responsible and does want to dig in a little bit more technically to how things work, I would highly recommend our SharePoint list session, which is episode 5, and our migration and document management in SharePoint episode 6. Stephanie will post the links to those sessions and that content here as well. So those are some sessions. You don't have to watch those, but by all means, if this is something you're trying to dig into and help your organization plan this transition, those are some other sessions that will help you down this journey. All right, without further ado, my favorite part, I like to spend as much time as possible on the demonstration, is looking at SharePoint lists and document storage and how that fits in. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna pull up, first and foremost, a non-Teams SharePoint site, and I'll illustrate that later. Again, I'm not going to go in too deep on this because we go into this otherwise, but very often there is Teams and non-Team SharePoint sites. It's non-Team SharePoint sites are called communication sites, but I like to call them non-Teams to be very direct. And you can have some different types of permissioning that applies to this. But my point is, this is a common way in which organizations look at, for instance, company templates and document templates. They're the authoritative, here are the documents, the source documents, the production documents that you want your team to use. And so I want to illustrate the problem we talked about earlier. By having, let's say this is your documents page. This is like in your organization, your production documents that you want, and you've got these subfolders that might be the way you've organized them in these documents in the past for the different departments: finance, HR, marketing, production, and/or service, depending on how you look at that, or sales, for example. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull over some documents, and I'm going to illustrate. So let's say I've got a document that is, and it might be small on the screen, that's the account receivable process. Well, okay, if I'm in the finance team, where should that document go? Well, it's probably going to go in finance. But if I'm on the sales team, and if I ever have the opportunity to need to engage or help talk through or help work with the relationship side of the accounts receivable because of some problem, well, maybe that applies to me in sales. So if I'm trying to take this document and put it in this folder structure, which one wins? Should it go in finance or should it go in sales? Well, most likely we go in finance, but again, I'm just trying to illustrate the point. What about a client engagement template? Well, maybe that's for the account management team, so that'll go into sales potentially, but maybe that lives in production or service because you also involve maybe your technical resources or your consulting resources or your production services as far as service delivery or manufacturing line. What about when you onboard new clients or customers? Well, does that go into service or production, or does that also go into sales? Or maybe marketing needs help with that. How do you know which one of these documents should live where? So this is a common problem that the legacy file storage doesn't really address, because you either end up saving these in multiple folders, and that might not be intentional. It might be because one person found this document and saved it in finance, and one person found this document and saved it in sales. So these are some of the common problems that you encounter when you're dealing with a legacy file storage. Now, again, you could copy and paste this into SharePoint, kind of like what I'm illustrating here, but I wanted to use this as an example to illustrate one of the fundamental problems we're trying to solve. And again, if you're a new person to the organization, how do you know where to go to find this, let alone saving it initially? So here's the way. I'm going to minimize this. I don't need to actually upload those to illustrate the point, but I'd like to show you there's another template here, a document library. So this is one document library that exists that I created. And then we created another document library that is the company templates. So what I've done is I'm taken those exact same files. In fact, I think I didn't use all of them in this illustration, but like account receivable process is here, client engagement template is here, Teams room gets started. Actually, I didn't upload that one. Vendor payment process is here. So I'm going to illustrate a couple of those, for example, to say, if this is an account receivable process, well, that is in the process of client onboarding and accounts receivable, but it also applies maybe to the department of sales or finance. So one of the ways that thinking through how redesigning your document storage is thinking about how your team uses this information, how you might want to enable your team to access this information. And so here we've illustrated no subfolders whatsoever. It's just the parent company templates kind of document library. And we've custom created these columns by process and by department. So I'll give you an example of how this can do it. Like if I clicked add column, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to go back into process and say, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to go to column settings, and I'm going to click edit. So if I go up here, this shows me all the different things I can do. So I chose to make this column a choice as opposed to a number or currency. You can customize all these items. I chose choice, and I custom entered these items. And you can change the color palette if you want by just clicking here and saying, oh, I don't like that color. I'd like it to be, I don't know. I want it to be that color instead. Okay, great. So now I changed the color, again, simple things. But just an example, this is how you can customize it. And then what I've done is I've come down here to more options, and I've said I want to allow multiple selections because I'm recognizing that there might be multiple attributes that apply to a single document. And then I could also choose to require that this column contains information or not. For here, I'm not going to do that, but I will show you later how that plays out. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. So now it's basically that simple to create and customize these columns. And then if I want to edit this document, what I can do is I can click on one of these. This little info button up here opens the details pane. So I can click on this. Now this is opening up the attributes of this file. So I'm taking the account management process file, again, as noted up here. And the name is here. Title, I don't know why it has a different one here, but that's just the way SharePoint has it. But if I want to choose a different process, I can come in here and say, well, account management, yep, it applies to that. But I think I'm also going to apply it to maybe client onboarding. I want to make sure that that's part of the process. So I'm going to click check that. So now I've added an attribute to that. And department, I'm also going to put, I think it also applies to service and production. So I'm going to save that. Great. So now I've added multiple attributes to that file. And I can just go ahead and hit close over here. So the other way I could do this, by the way, and I just want to show you a couple examples, is that if I, up here, there's this edit in grid view option. So I'm going to click that and you'll see what this does. It actually takes the document and it gives you kind of a grid. And so I could add a column if I wanted, or if I wanted to come in here to edit, I could click here and I would say, oh, I want to add HR to this one for whatever reason. Okay, even though that's probably a bad example for the account receivable process. Actually, let's remove HR. Let's make it service because maybe that's more applicable. Because maybe it's a service problem that caused an AR issue. So here's an example of the way you can do that, and then you can just you can edit all the documents or all the different attributes at the same time, as opposed to individually opening up the editing pane. So then I'll come up here and hit exit grid view. Basically, it saves it, and now we have that set. So this is an example of, again, think about the company templates you have, the instructional documents, the guides. This could be HR. This could be, again, sales process, client engagement processes, any of these that I'm talking about here, vendor payment processes, et cetera. And so this is a way, again, this is a very simple view, and I'll show you a more complicated view in a moment. But this is a way where you can start creating a structure that allows multiple attributes and sets your team up to access this information faster. So I'll show you how to do that. So over here, you can click on the filter pane. So I like this little icon up here. And now I can choose the process or the department that this is in. So let's say I want to choose anything that applies to the client onboarding process. But then I'm on the service team. So now I've got these documents that are part of that. Or maybe I'm on the production team. So now there's only 2 documents that apply to production and that. Or maybe I don't want client onboarding, I just want any production documents. So this allows you to quickly sort and filter through depending on, again, we just chose the attributes. For example, you could choose any attributes you want, but we chose the attributes of process, like what process are you working in and or what department are you in to help you narrow down the list of documents. This is just a common example of what might be applicable across lots of organizations. But once you do this, the other thing you can do is you can save these views. So for instance, I can come in here and say, I want client onboarding. So what I can do now that I've got this view, I could come this little drop down here next to the all documents. I can say, save this view. Actually, I already did a client onboarding, but I could save this view as client. Actually, I'm going to choose a different one. Forgive me because I didn't realize I'd already saved a client onboarding. I'm just going to do account management. Do I have that one yet? No, I don't. Okay, so I'm going to come down here and say save view as, this is the account management view. And I can also say make this view public. And when I do that, it saves the view. And now notice it's called the account management view up here. So there's a couple things I can do. I can make multiple different types of views. So I can have, let's say I want to navigate to the client onboarding process. Click. Now it applies the filter that has any client onboarding documents. If I want to look at the finance department, click. Now it only gives me the documents that are applicable to the finance department. The other thing is, let's say I'm in the finance department. So instead of necessarily having to make these clicks every time I come to this page, I can come in here and say set current view as default. So I can do that. So anytime I come to this page, this is going to be the default view. Anyway, so that's an example of how you can use the views, saves, filters, and sorts in order to find documents. So let me give you an example of how this applies to like Mytech actually has some of this. So we actually have a SharePoint site. We call it our continual service improvement site, and we have a document library called production documents. We have, I don't even know how many documents in here, hundreds. And one of the challenges that we were faced with is, again, these are the authoritative documents that we want our entire team to use whenever they do whatever it is in their organization that's applicable to them, that we've identified a process, a checklist, a guide, et cetera, in order to be able to execute. So we identified that there's 2 attributes that will probably be the easiest way to narrow down the documents that you end up wanting to find, and that is by department and or process. Basically the same illustration I showed. However, it's a lot more documents. So I'm going to come up here to all documents or go to filters. And I want to go up here and say, I want to look for anything in procurement. So these are now the narrowed list of procurement. Or let's say what I want to do, I want to get out of procurement. I want to look at, see process and department. I want to do the Smart Business Suite, and I'll look at that. So anything for the Smart Business Suite. And then, but what if I'm in the Smart Business Suite, and then I want to look for anything that's service related to the Smart Business Suite. So now I've got service, Smart Business Suite. So it's narrowed down the list of documents. So all of them are here, and in order for us to click in, and we don't have to click in and out of different subfolders in order for our team to find the information that they're seeking. All right, now I know I went quick through all of that, but that's an illustration of what I wanted to show you relative to using SharePoint lists in order to create those filters and show those different ways of filtering and sorting and views. Okay. Now I want to transition a little bit. So I want to go to, let's now use a Teams environment. So I'm actually going to pull up the team structure. Let's say we have, let's say we have a team that's called your all company team. That's a very common team that exists in most organizations. And there's subfolders here. We have general, archive data, and training channels. So these are just the channels that we created on this team. I'm just going to use that for illustration purposes because I'm now in the all MTP 365 SharePoint site. So that's the SharePoint site that's connected to that all 365 SharePoint team. And I'm in the document library, the default document library. And if you notice, there's the general folder, the archive data folder, and the training channel folder. Those are the folders that got created because there are respective channels inside of the all company team. Now, there are other libraries here, other folders here too. So you can create folders here without them being a channel, but just know that when you create a channel, it also creates the respective folders. So what I want to show you here is that it's not always all or none, like I just showed you as far as no subfolders. Well, maybe that makes sense to have subfolders. So let's click into HR. And so let's say we have some documents here, and we've created some custom columns here like year of content and department. So this applies to 2021. It's been updated in 2021, but maybe these haven't been updated since 2020. Again, I'm just using some arbitrary examples. I have also set that this is, it's missing information. If I set this field as required, and I'll show you, for example, as I've come down here, required that this column contains information is set to yes. And so it will give me a visual cue that there's information missing, and it'll give me a visual cue here that there's information missing. So I'm going to go in here, and I've selected this. I need to come in here and say select options. This applies to, hypothetically speaking, let's say operations. Check. So now information filled in. I'm going to come here, do the same thing. Just an example of how easy it is to do. Sales. Okay, done. I could have again also come up here to edit in grid view and selected those, but I just chose to go into the individual metadata. What do they call it? The details pane. So that's an example how you might be able to use a subfolder of HR documents and then use metadata. But I'll give you an example of why you might choose to use it this way, or why you might choose to have a separate document library. Because the metadata, notice the metadata exists here, just like it exists here. The metadata in the SharePoint list information is specific to the document library. So I've also got a training channel, and we happen to have a recording sub channel. And so I could come in here and say, oh, well, gosh, this was January 29th. I need to come down here. This is maybe operations training. Great. And then the year, it was actually 2021. We did it earlier this year, hypothetically speaking. There we go. Okay, so now it's saved. I can click out of it. Hopefully that refreshes that data. Oh, shoot. There we are. 2021 and operations. So here you go. So I added that. Now there's no longer a required field because the information has been filled in, so it's not giving me that error anymore. But the problem is that, not necessarily the problem, but just be aware that because this document library this is the parent of the document library, the metadata that you choose over here, the custom columns that you might choose to use, are applicable to everything inside of this document library. That's what's really important to understand. But if that makes sense for the content that you're sharing, great, it makes sense. But if you wanted to be able to have a different document library, so for instance, I'll show you another example, is that in the marketing team, actually, Here's another document library that now I didn't put anything in here, but here's a document library that I could upload files, and it doesn't have, it has location as a document library filter set versus year of content and department. So it's important to understand that if the metadata that you're using, custom column information, if that makes sense, is applicable to everything in the document library, then that might make sense. Where I see this applied is if people have a customer or client section where they might have a client subfolder, so they've got a list of all their clients, and maybe there's a folder for every client, but yet they have the type of document like agreement or contract or just the different types of documents that they might have relative to their clients or customers. And so they'll have columns that are unique to the types of documents that they expect to have for their customers, but yet they have a folder structure that has their individual clients or customers listed. So that's an example where you might want to have a hybrid a folder structure and metadata, but also identify that if there's metadata that you want different, then you probably want a different document library. So that was one of the things we wanted to talk about as far as sites. Let's see here, I want to double check. Good. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show you is now we've talked about the hybrid, all or none kind of and hybrid, but let's now move to the different use for SharePoint lists. A different use is just a list. So this is, again, one of the common problems or common misconceptions or misunderstandings is that when you refer to SharePoint lists, and again, thank you, Microsoft, they often do this where they call something the same thing, but it is applied differently in different situations. Okay, so SharePoint lists, when we're talking about here, this is SharePoint lists. We're using lists to do document storage and document metadata. But sometimes you use a list, so a common use that we see is using like an issue or discussion topic. So like, for instance, we've created this so saying, hey, if we're the marketing team and we have a parking board or a discussion list that we want to have for our team meeting, hey, when are we having team happy hour? Who added this? When was it added? Is this issue completed or open? And what did we agree upon when we had this conversation? So if I'm coming into a new meeting, I can come in here and say, I want to look at anything that is open because I don't want to see anything that's completed. So now this is the one thing that we need to talk about. So this is a way that you can filter through it, and then you can come in here and say, open up the details pane, categories issue, it's open. We actually completed this one, so great. And we agreed to take an action. This action, right? So this is something that you can do that actually then is a way for you to track and keep track of an issues list or a parking board for common meetings. Sometimes this is for weekly team meetings or monthly leadership team meetings or quarterly strategic meetings, things like that. And again, because I completed that one, it refreshed and it didn't allow me. So now I'm going to clear this filter. And now it'll show that issue is completed, but it allows me to go back and look at those issues. So this is an example of how SharePoint lists are also used when it's not relative to document storage. And I'll show you one other way that the way Mytech uses this is that we actually have a leadership development page on our SharePoint site where we recommend curriculum. Books. And so we have our core curriculum, like this is core curriculum that is books that our culture is based upon. Great by Choice and Traction and Make a Difference, Ideal Team Player. We also have, again, sales and marketing curriculum, other suggested reading, book reviews, recorded content that we've done for leadership development. And we also have other podcasts that are third-party videos and podcasts that we recommend for people to watch from a culture perspective. So this is another example of a list that we've created custom folders into or custom columns for people to be able to search and sort and find information. So these are just different ways in which lists can be used outside of document storage. I want to give you a couple of examples of that. But primarily, again, we're talking about how SharePoint lists apply to document storage. So as we're coming to wrap up here, rethink how documents are stored based on ease of access, how your team is going to access the information, and to try and make fewer clicks for them to find the information they need. What metadata or subfolders or a combination of both might make sense depending on the department or the function that you're trying or the problem you're trying to solve. Again, lists are specific to the document library. If you're creating metadata in those columns, it's specific to the entire document library. So if you need or you want different metadata, you got to have a different document library. Team sites versus communication sites is an important thing to note. As I showed you an example of where if you have the team site and channels, like the all company channels, that will also start creating the default folder structure. If you have a non-team site or a communication site, you can actually completely prescribe that. There's different permissions you can apply, and that's something that oftentimes applies to things like company templates and company documents that are the authoritative production documents. Plan ahead. This does take some homework. We've helped lots of organizations walk through this, and it probably takes a good 6 to 8 weeks to go through the different iterative processes and steps to kind of wrap your head around all the different ways that this applies to figure out how your team structure might be built, your file structure might be built, team sites versus communication sites, document libraries, lists, etc. There's a lot of information to think through, and so plan ahead if you're trying to make a migration happen. The other thing that we might suggest as a consideration is that we recommend maybe create a test team. So if you have a subset of your group or your organization that's going to work on this, create a team or a site or both, and test. Make it a non-production environment that you can use to play through these different scenarios to think through what might work for you or not before you move to a production environment. All right, so those are some of the items to consider. So look, next steps. Identify, if you're trying to do this, identify when you may want to make the move to SharePoint, whether it's all of your files or not, and just plan ahead, take some time. Note some of the key items that can be impactful to your organization that might be catalysts to make this change happen, or some of the value add and some of the ease of use that you can start realizing the benefit of when you make this change. That'll help keep top of mind why you're putting all this effort into to redesign this structure. And by all means, raise your hand. If there's anything that you think we can help you with, we help organizations think through this. Look, we don't know the answers that's the right fit for your organization, but what we can do is help you think through all these different scenarios and think through these options and challenge you to try and help you feel like you've come up with an answer that is the best fit for your organization. And join us for future virtual training events. We've got a whole event calendar published at mytech.com/events, as well as Power User Group sessions. And we're bringing back in-person client immersion experience events. We have one in September and October in both Minnesota and Colorado. If you're looking for those, there's limited seating, only 12 people at a time. Love to have you. Finally, thank you so much for attending. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel or follow us on LinkedIn, or share this content with anyone you feel could benefit if they're going down this path or this journey. Thank you so much for attending,